Every night at 3:47 a.m., a woman appears in my room for exactly 26 minutes. She's been dead for 3 years and she needs my help to remember how she died. Ryan had always been a practical person. He didn't believe in ghosts, spirits, or anything he couldn't see with his own eyes. So when he moved into his new apartment that October, the last thing he expected was to question everything he thought he knew about reality. The apartment was perfect for him. Small, affordable, and just 15 minutes from his office. He worked as a graphic designer mostly from home, so he needed a quiet place where he could focus. The previous tenant had left in a hurry, according to the landlord, but Ryan didn't think much of it. People move all the time, right? He spent his first week settling in, arranging his desk by the window, hanging his favorite posters, and getting used to the creaky floorboards. Everything felt normal, peaceful even. He'd just gone through a rough breakup with his girlfriend of 3 years, and this fresh start was exactly what he needed. Then came the first night. Ryan woke up suddenly. His phone screen glowed in the darkness. 3:47 in the morning. He hadn't set an alarm, so why was he awake? That's when he smelled it. A sweet floral scent filling his room. Jasmine, strong and unmistakable, like someone had just sprayed perfume right next to his bed. He sat up, his heart beating a little faster. The scent was everywhere, but there was no logical source. He didn't own any air fresheners or candles. His ex-girlfriend used to wear vanilla perfume, never jasmine. This smell was completely foreign to his apartment. Looking around in the dim light, Ryan noticed something odd. His bedroom door was slightly open. He always closed it before bed, always. It was one of those habits he'd developed over years of living alone. He climbed out of bed and walked to the door, checking the hallway. Nothing. The apartment was silent and empty, but when he returned to his bed, he saw it. A faint impression on the corner of his mattress near the foot of the bed. Like someone had been sitting there. The covers were slightly disturbed, wrinkled in a way they hadn't been when he fell asleep. Ryan stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of it. Maybe he'd been tossing and turning in his sleep. Maybe the door hadn't been closed properly, and the smell could be coming from outside, from a neighbor's apartment through the vents. He convinced himself it was nothing and went back to sleep, though it took him nearly an hour to stop thinking about it. The next morning, over coffee, Ryan laughed at himself. Grown man, scared by a smell and an open door. He blamed it on stress, on adjusting to a new place, on his imagination working overtime. He threw himself into his work that day, designing logos for a new client, and forgot all about the strange wake-up call. Until it happened again. 3:47 in the morning. Same time, exact same minute. Ryan's eyes opened and immediately he knew. The jasmine scent was back, even stronger this time. His door was open again, but this time something was different. He saw movement. Near his closet, in the shadows where the streetlight from his window didn't quite reach, something shifted. A silhouette. The shape of a person, a woman he thought, based on the outline. She seemed to be standing there just watching. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. His hand fumbled for the lamp on his nightstand, fingers shaking as he found the switch and turned it on. Light flooded the room. Nothing. Nobody. The corner near his closet was completely empty, but the scent remained, stronger than ever, and now Ryan could feel his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. He checked the closet, looked under the bed, searched every corner of his apartment. All the windows were locked from the inside. The front door was deadbolted, just as he'd left it. This wasn't his imagination. Something was happening, something he couldn't explain. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Ryan lay awake until dawn, watching the shadows, listening for any sound. When morning finally arrived, he was exhausted but determined. If this was going to keep happening, he needed proof. He needed to know he wasn't losing his mind. Ryan spent his day differently this time. Instead of working, he researched. He looked up carbon monoxide poisoning, wondering if hallucinations could be caused by a leak. He scheduled an inspection. He read about sleep paralysis, lucid dreaming, anything that might explain what he was experiencing, but none of it felt right. He wasn't paralyzed. He wasn't dreaming. And the jasmine scent was too real, too specific. That evening, before bed, Ryan set up his phone on his dresser, angled toward his bed and the door. He started a recording app that would capture all night. If something came into his room, if that door opened on its own, he'd have evidence. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was being ridiculous. His friends would think he'd lost it if they knew what he was doing, recording his empty bedroom like some amateur ghost hunter. 3:47 came right on schedule. Ryan woke to the now familiar scent, but this time he didn't move. He kept his eyes closed, listening. There was a sound, soft and gentle, breathing, not his own. Someone else was in the room, breathing quietly, carefully, as if trying not to wake him. The mattress shifted slightly. Someone was sitting on his bed again, right at the foot, just like that first night. Ryan could feel the weight, feel the gentle depression in the mattress. His whole body tensed. Every instinct screamed at him to jump up, to run, to do something. But curiosity won over fear. He slowly opened his eyes, just a fraction peeking through his lashes. He saw her. A young woman sat at the edge of his bed, her back to him. She wore a simple white dress and her dark hair fell past her shoulders. She seemed solid, real, not transparent or ghostly at all. She was looking toward the window, and even from behind, Ryan could sense a deep sadness emanating from her. His phone was recording. Whatever this was, he was capturing it. The woman turned slightly as if sensing something, and Ryan quickly shut his eyes. His breathing had changed, gotten faster, and maybe she noticed. He heard a soft sigh, felt the weight lift from the mattress, and then nothing. When he opened his eyes again, she was gone. The jasmine scent began to fade, and by the time he looked at his phone, it was 4:13 in the morning. 26 minutes. Whatever this was, it lasted exactly 26 minutes. Ryan grabbed his phone with trembling hands and stopped the recording. Hours of footage to review. He fast-forwarded through the early parts, watching himself sleep in the dark room. Then at 3:47, the screen went crazy. Static. Visual distortion, like the camera couldn't focus properly. The audio crackled with interference, but underneath the static he could hear it. Soft breathing, the rustle of fabric, and his own voice, barely a whisper, as his breathing changed in his sleep. The video cleared up again at 4:13. Nothing visible, but the evidence was there. Something happened in his room every night at the exact same time. Something that interfered with electronics. Something that left behind the smell of jasmine. Ryan didn't go back to sleep. He sat at his kitchen table drinking coffee as the sun rose, trying to process what was happening to him. He'd always been logical, always had an explanation for everything, but this defied every rational thought he'd ever had. His life had been so normal just a week ago. Now he was living in an apartment haunted by a sad woman in a white dress who appeared every night for exactly 26 minutes. The strangest part? He wasn't terrified anymore. Seeing her, even just her back, had changed something. She didn't seem dangerous. She seemed lost, lonely, like she was trapped in some pattern she couldn't break. Ryan made a decision as he finished his third cup of coffee. He wasn't going to run away. He wasn't going to move out or pretend this wasn't happening. Instead, he was going to figure out who she was and why she kept coming to his room. He had no idea that this decision would change everything, that it would lead him down a path he never imagined, or that the sad woman in white would become the most important mystery of his life. All he knew was that tonight, at 3:47, she'd be back, and this time he'd be ready. The days that followed turned Ryan into someone he barely recognized. He'd always been the type to stick to routines, to keep things simple and organized. Now his apartment looked like a detective's office from some crime show. Notes covered his walls. Printouts of articles, timelines, questions scribbled on sticky notes. He'd become obsessed, and he knew it. Every night, the pattern repeated. 3:47 in the morning, the jasmine scent would fill his room. His door would open, and she would appear, sitting on his bed or standing near the window, always looking sad, always disappearing exactly 26 minutes later. Ryan tried everything to capture better evidence. He bought a proper camera with night vision. He set up multiple recording devices. But the result was always the same. Static and distortion during those exact 26 minutes, with only audio clues that something was there. His friends started noticing the change. When they called, he'd make excuses not to meet up. His appearance grew rougher, dark circles under his eyes from the sleep he was losing. He'd stay awake every night, watching, waiting, trying to understand. On the 5th night, Ryan tried something different. Before going to bed, he left a note on his nightstand. Simple, direct. Written in clear letters, "Who are you? What do you want?" He didn't really expect an answer. This was crazy, right? Leaving notes for a ghost? But he was desperate for any kind of communication, any way to understand what was happening. That morning, when he checked the nightstand, his breath caught. Below his note, in handwriting he'd never seen before, delicate and careful, were words that made his hands shake. "I'm sorry I wake you." Ryan stared at those words for a long time. She could write. She could read his note and respond. This wasn't just some recording from the past, some loop of energy. She was aware. She knew he was there. That changed everything. His mind raced with possibilities. If she could communicate, maybe she could answer questions. Maybe he could help her. But how? And why was she here in the first place? Ryan decided to learn everything he could about his apartment. He started with the landlord, asking casual questions about previous tenants. The landlord was hesitant at first, but Ryan played it off as simple curiosity. Turned out a young woman had lived here 3 years ago. Her name was Isabella Cruz, and she'd vanished without a trace. The landlord got quiet when talking about it. "Strange business that was," he said, shaking his head. "Police came, asked questions, searched the place. Never found anything. Her family was devastated. Case went cold pretty quick. Isabella." The name echoed in Ryan's mind. Could that be her? The woman appearing in his room? He went to the local library and searched through old newspaper archives. There it was. A small article from 3 years back. "Local woman missing, family pleads for information." The article showed a photo. A young woman with dark hair and kind eyes smiling at the camera. Ryan's heart nearly stopped. It was her. The same woman he'd seen sitting on his bed. The article said Isabella had been a perfume maker, running a small online business from her home. She specialized in floral scents, particularly jasmine. She was 26 years old when she disappeared. No signs of struggle in her apartment, no leads. It was like she'd simply vanished into thin air. But reading between the lines, Ryan found something troubling. The article mentioned that Isabella had filed a police report 2 weeks before her disappearance, claiming someone was following her. She'd felt unsafe, watched. The police had taken her statement but found no evidence of stalking. Then she was gone. Ryan felt sick reading this. This wasn't just some random spirit haunting an apartment. This was a person. Someone with a life, with dreams, with people who loved her. Someone who'd been scared before she disappeared. That night, he left another note. "Is your name Isabella? I want to help you." The response came in the morning. "I don't know why I'm here. I can't stop coming. Help me remember." Something broke inside Ryan reading those words. This woman, this spirit, she was trapped. Confused. She didn't even fully understand her own situation. The sadness he'd sensed in her wasn't just emotion. It was the weight of being lost, of not knowing why or how or what happened. He started leaving notes every night. At first, simple questions. Then, as she responded, the notes became conversations. She told him fragments of memories. She remembered her apartment, her work with perfumes, the smell of jasmine that she'd loved so much. She remembered feeling afraid those last few weeks, but she couldn't remember what happened to her. That part was blank, like a missing chapter in a book. Ryan learned more about her through these written conversations than he'd learned about some people he'd known for years. Isabella had been artistic, gentle, full of dreams about opening her own perfume shop someday. She'd been kind to everyone, had rescued cats from shelters, had sent her mother flowers every week. The notes piled up. Ryan kept them all, organized by date, reading and rereading them. His apartment became a shrine to this strange communication between the living and the dead. His research intensified. He found Isabella's old social media profiles frozen in time. Her last post was haunting. "Feeling unsafe lately. Someone's been watching my building. Can't shake this feeling." Posted just 3 days before she disappeared. The comments below were full of concern from friends and family. "Call the police." "Stay with us." "Do you want me to come over?" But Isabella had never responded to any of them. Ryan scrolled through her photos. Pictures of perfume bottles she'd made. Photos with friends at coffee shops. A picture of her in this very apartment smiling, holding up a bottle of jasmine perfume. The caption read, "Finally perfected my signature scent." Looking at these frozen moments of her life made everything feel more real and more tragic. This wasn't just a mystery to solve. This was a person who'd had her whole life ahead of her. One night, Ryan stayed completely still when 3:47 arrived. He pretended to sleep, controlling his breathing, keeping his eyes just barely open. The jasmine scent filled the room. The door opened silently, and she appeared. Isabella materialized near the window, looking out at the street below. She seemed so solid, so real. She turned toward the bed, toward him, and started walking slowly. Ryan's heart hammered, but he forced himself to stay still. She sat on the edge of the bed, just like always. But this time she turned to look at him. Her face was beautiful and impossibly sad. Tears glistened on her cheeks. She reached out slowly, her hand moving toward his face, but stopped just inches away. "Help me remember," she whispered, her voice barely audible, like wind through leaves. Ryan's eyes flew open at the sound of her actual voice. For a moment they stared at each other. Her eyes widened in surprise. Then, like smoke and wind, she vanished. He sat up, breathing hard. She'd spoken. He'd heard her actual voice, not just read her words. And she'd looked right at him, seen that he was awake, that he was aware of her. The next morning he found a longer note than usual. "You saw me. You really saw me. No one has seen me in so long. I feel so alone here, trapped in these 26 minutes every night. Thank you for not running away. Thank you for trying to help. But I'm scared. I don't know what happened to me and I don't know how to move forward." Ryan wrote back immediately. "I'm going to find out what happened to you. I promise. You're not alone anymore." He didn't know if he could keep that promise. He didn't know where to start or if solving her disappearance would even help her move on. But looking at her handwriting, feeling the weight of her loneliness, he knew he had to try. His whole life had become about this. About her. About solving a mystery that the police had given up on years ago. Friends stopped calling as much. His work suffered. He took fewer clients, spent less time on designs. All he could think about was Isabella, about what had happened in this apartment 3 years ago, about why she was trapped here. The notes kept coming, and through them, he learned more. She'd had an ex-boyfriend who couldn't let go. His name was David. He'd become controlling near the end of their relationship, checking her phone, showing up unannounced. She'd broken up with him 6 months before she disappeared, but he'd kept trying to contact her. The police had questioned him, Isabella's notes revealed. She remembered bits and pieces, but there hadn't been enough evidence to charge him with anything. Ryan felt a chill reading this. An obsessive ex-boyfriend, a woman who disappeared from her locked apartment. And now her spirit, trapped here, unable to remember the crucial details. He knew what he had to do next, even though the thought terrified him. He had to find David. He had to investigate on his own, dig deeper than the police had. Because Isabella deserved answers. She deserved peace. And somewhere deep inside, Ryan realized this had become about more than just helping a lost soul. Through their nightly notes, through the quiet moments of seeing her sadness, he'd started to care about Isabella in a way he couldn't quite explain. She wasn't just a ghost haunting his apartment anymore. She was a person who needed help, and he was going to give it to her no matter what it took. The library became Ryan's second home. He spent hours there, going through old records, news articles, anything that might give him more information about Isabella's case. The librarian started recognizing him, giving him sympathetic looks as he hunched over microfiche readers and stacks of printed papers. What he found painted a clearer picture, and it wasn't a comforting one. David Morrison had been Isabella's boyfriend for 2 years. On the surface, he seemed normal. Worked in tech, had a good job, no criminal record. But digging deeper into social media posts and comments from people who knew them, Ryan found a pattern. Friends had been worried about Isabella during the relationship. There were hints of controlling behavior, of isolation. One friend had commented on an old photo, "So glad you're finally free. You deserve so much better than someone who tracked your every move." Another wrote, "About time you blocked him. That guy was seriously creepy." Isabella had responded to that one, "I just want to move on and feel safe again." Ryan's hands clenched, reading these. The timeline was clear. Isabella broke up with David 6 months before vanishing. During those months, David had continued trying to contact her. She'd blocked him on everything, filed that police report about being followed. Then she disappeared. The police had questioned David. Ryan found the information in a news follow-up article. David had an alibi. He'd been at work during the hours Isabella was last seen. Security footage confirmed it. That had been enough for the police to move on to look elsewhere. But Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He started making notes, creating timelines, mapping out everything he knew. His apartment walls were covered with printouts, sticky notes, strings connecting different pieces of information. Through their nightly written conversations, Isabella confirmed more details. She remembered David's obsession, how he'd shown up at her apartment building just standing outside, watching, how he'd created new social media accounts to message her after she blocked him, how scared she'd been those last few weeks. "I remember being afraid to come home," one of her notes read. "I remember looking over my shoulder constantly. But I can't remember that last day. It's like my memory just stops." Ryan responded, "Sometimes trauma blocks memories. But we'll figure this out together. I'm looking into everything." He decided he needed to talk to people who knew Isabella, her family, her friends. But how could he approach them without seeming crazy? "Hi, I live in your missing daughter's old apartment and her spirit visits me every night." Wasn't exactly a conversation starter. Instead, Ryan created a cover story. He was a freelance writer working on an article about unsolved disappearances, about cases that deserved more attention. It wasn't entirely a lie. Isabella's case did deserve more attention. He reached out to Isabella's mother through social media, his message carefully worded and respectful. To his surprise, she responded. She agreed to meet him at a coffee shop downtown. Mrs. Cruz was a kind woman in her 50s, but grief had aged her. Ryan could see it in her eyes, the weight of 3 years without answers. She brought a folder of photos and documents, eager to share her daughter's story with anyone who'd listen. "The police gave up so fast," she said, her voice quiet. "They said there was no evidence of anything. Like my Isabella just chose to walk away from her life. But she wouldn't do that. She loved her family. She loved her work. Something happened to her." Ryan listened, taking notes, his heart aching for this woman who'd lost her daughter. She told him about Isabella's passion for perfumes, how she'd mixed scents in their kitchen as a teenager, driving everyone crazy with the strong smells but creating beautiful combinations. Her signature scent was jasmine, Mrs. Cruz said with a sad smile. She wore it every day, said it made her feel confident and calm. "After she disappeared, I couldn't smell jasmine for a year without breaking down." Ryan knew that smell intimately now. Every night at 3:47, it filled his room. Mrs. Cruz talked about David too, and her expression darkened. "I never liked him. Something about the way he looked at Isabella. Like she was a possession, not a person. When she finally broke up with him, I was so relieved. But then he wouldn't leave her alone. The police talked to him, but they said he had an alibi." "Do you think he was involved?" Ryan asked carefully. "A mother knows," she said, her eyes fierce. "I know he had something to do with it. I feel it in my bones. But feeling isn't evidence, and the police needed evidence." She gave Ryan copies of everything she had. Isabella's last social media posts, the police report about being followed, even some text messages David had sent that Isabella had shown her mother. They were disturbing, possessive. "You belong with me. You'll never find anyone who loves you like I do. I can't live without you." The last text, sent 2 days before Isabella disappeared. "If I can't have you, I'll make sure I'm the last person you think about every day." Ryan felt cold reading that. It sounded like a threat. That night, he shared what he'd learned with Isabella through their notes. Her response was shaky, the handwriting more chaotic than usual. "Reading about him makes me feel sick. I remember that fear. I remember his eyes when I told him it was over. But I still can't remember what happened. Why can't I remember?" Ryan wrote back, "Your mind is protecting you from something traumatic. But I'm going to find the truth. I promise." He started researching David Morrison's current life. It wasn't hard to find him online. David lived 2 towns over now, working for a different tech company. His social media was private, but Ryan found enough public information to learn his routines. This was where things got dangerous, Ryan knew. He was crossing a line from research into something more active. But looking at Isabella's notes, feeling her presence every night, knowing she was trapped in confusion and fear, he couldn't stop. He decided to visit David's workplace, pretending to be someone else, someone asking about local tech jobs. The building had a cafe on the ground floor where employees took breaks. Ryan camped out there for 3 days, watching, waiting. On the third day, David appeared. Ryan recognized him from old photos. He looked ordinary. Average height, dressed business casual. Nothing threatening about his appearance. But when Ryan observed him with the barista, he noticed something. The way David got irritated when his coffee wasn't exactly right. The way he corrected the barista sharply. His tone condescending. Ryan followed him at a distance, careful not to be obvious. David got into his car and Ryan memorized the license plate. He didn't follow him home, that would be too risky. But he had enough to run a basic search through public records. David owned a house now, bought a year after Isabella's disappearance. Ryan found the address. Against his better judgment, he drove past it one evening. It was a normal house in a normal neighborhood. Nothing sinister about it, but something made Ryan park down the street and watch. Maybe it was crazy. Maybe he was becoming as obsessed as David had been with Isabella. But he felt like he was close to something. An hour passed. Then David came out to his car, loading some boxes into the trunk. Ryan squinted, trying to see what they were. When David went back inside, Ryan made a split-second decision. He got out of his car and walked casually past David's house, glancing at the boxes visible through the car window. His blood ran cold. Air fresheners. Dozens of them, all the same scent. The packaging showed jasmine flowers. David was obsessed with the scent of jasmine. Isabella's signature scent. 3 years after her disappearance, he was still surrounding himself with reminders of her. Ryan quickly walked back to his car, his heart pounding. This wasn't proof of anything illegal, but it was deeply disturbing. It showed that David hadn't moved on, that his obsession with Isabella continued long after she was gone. That night, Ryan told Isabella everything through their notes. Her response came quickly. He kept things that belonged to me. I remember now. Little things went missing toward the end. A scarf, a perfume bottle. I thought I'd misplaced them. But he was taking them, wasn't he? Keeping pieces of me. Ryan felt anger rising in him. I think so. And I think he knows more about what happened to you than he told police. He lay in bed that night waiting for 3:47. When the jasmine scent filled the room and Isabella appeared, he didn't pretend to sleep. He sat up and looked at her directly. She stood near the window looking back at him. In the dim light, her form seemed more solid than usual, more present. I'm going to find out what he did, Ryan said aloud. I'm going to get you the answers you need. Isabella's form flickered. She moved closer to the bed, closer than she'd ever come while he was awake and watching. When she spoke, her voice was clearer than he'd ever heard it. I'm afraid of what you'll find, but I'm more afraid of being trapped here forever, never knowing, never understanding why I can't leave. You won't be trapped forever, Ryan promised. I won't let that happen. She reached out again, and this time her hand came closer to his face. He felt cold, not freezing, but like a cool breeze. Then she smiled, just slightly. The first time he'd seen anything other than sadness on her face. Thank you for seeing me when no one else could, she whispered. Then 4:13 came, and she faded away, leaving only the scent of jasmine and the weight of Ryan's promise hanging in the air. He knew what he had to do next, even though it scared him. He had to confront David Morrison. Ryan spent the next week preparing. He couldn't just walk up to David and accuse him of murder. He needed a strategy, a way to get David to reveal something, anything that would lead to real evidence. The cover story of being a freelance writer had worked with Isabella's mother. Maybe it would work with David too. Ryan created a fake website for himself, listing articles he'd written about technology and business. He researched David's company, learned about their products, made himself look legitimate. Then he sent David an email through LinkedIn. Professional friendly, he was writing a piece about successful tech professionals in smaller cities, highlighting how talent exists everywhere, not just Silicon Valley. Would David be willing to be interviewed? To Ryan's surprise, David agreed. They set up a meeting at a cafe, neutral ground. Ryan's hands shook as he drove there. This man had likely done something terrible to Isabella, and Ryan was about to sit across from him and pretend to chat casually about careers. David arrived exactly on time. Up close, he looked even more ordinary than he had from a distance. Friendly smile, firm handshake, carrying himself with quiet confidence. They started with safe topics, David's work, his rise in the company, his thoughts on the tech industry. Ryan recorded the conversation openly, saying it was for his article. David seemed flattered by the attention, becoming more animated as he talked about himself. Slowly, carefully, Ryan steered the conversation toward personal topics. Life balance, handling stress, relationships. David's demeanor shifted slightly when Ryan mentioned relationships. I'm single now, David said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Had a serious relationship years ago, but it didn't work out. Sorry to hear that, Ryan said, keeping his voice neutral. Those endings can be tough. Yeah. David's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. Especially when the other person doesn't give it a real chance, doesn't appreciate what they have. There was an edge to his voice now, something bitter underneath. Ryan pushed a little further. Must have been hard to move on. Who says I've moved on? David laughed, but it sounded forced. Some people, they get under your skin. You can't just forget them. Ryan felt his pulse quicken. I get that. Though I guess at some point you have to let go, right? David's expression changed. Something flickered across his face, something dark. Some things you don't let go of. Some people belong to you even if they don't know it. The words hung in the air. Ryan tried to keep his expression neutral, professional, even as alarm bells rang in his head. That's an interesting perspective, he said carefully. David seemed to realize he'd said something odd. He backtracked, laughing again. Sorry, that came out weird. I just meant that some relationships leave a lasting impact, you know? They talked for another 20 minutes, but Ryan's mind was racing. David's words, his tone, the way his whole demeanor had shifted when talking about his ex-relationship. It all pointed to someone who hadn't let go, who still felt ownership over someone who'd left him. As they parted ways, David mentioned something that made Ryan's blood run cold. If you want to see my home office set up for your article, I'm happy to show you. I've got a pretty nice workspace. Could make for good photos. It was an innocent offer on the surface, but something about the way David smiled when he said it felt like a challenge. Like he knew Ryan was looking for something and was daring him to come find it. Ryan thanked him and said he'd think about it. As he drove away, he immediately called Isabella's mother. He needed to know if the police had ever searched David's property. They searched his apartment at the time, Mrs. Cruz told him, but he moved after that, bought a house. I tried to get them to search the new place, but they said they had no cause. No new evidence. Ryan thanked her and hung up. David's house hadn't been searched. If there was evidence, it could still be there. That night, Ryan's conversation with Isabella through notes was intense. He told her about meeting David, about his strange comments, about the invitation to his house. Her response was shaky. Don't go there alone. He's dangerous. I remember that now. I remember being afraid of what he might do. Please be careful. But Ryan was too deep into this now. He'd promised to find answers, and they were so close. He could feel it. Over the next few days, Ryan did more research. He found David's property records, got a sense of the layout from real estate listings. The house sat on a large lot backing up to woods, isolated, private. He also discovered something else. David had owned a cabin before buying this house, a small property in the woods about 30 miles away. He'd sold it a year after Isabella disappeared, but the timing struck Ryan as significant. He started reaching out to people who might have information. The real estate agent who'd sold the cabin, neighbors who'd lived near David's old apartment. Piece by piece, he gathered small details. One neighbor remembered David being odd during the time Isabella went missing. He seemed stressed, the elderly woman told Ryan over the phone. Lost weight. Looked like he wasn't sleeping. Then suddenly, about 2 months after that girl disappeared, he seemed better. Calmer, like a weight had been lifted. 2 months after. That timing bothered Ryan. What had changed for David 2 months after Isabella vanished? He took his information to the police, finally. Walked into the station with all his notes, his research, his recordings. The detective who'd handled Isabella's case was still there, older now, tired-looking. Detective Hayes listened to Ryan's presentation, looked through the evidence, asked how Ryan had gotten involved in all this. I live in her old apartment, Ryan said, sticking close to the truth. I got curious about her case. It bothered me that it was never solved. Hayes sighed. Look, kid, I appreciate the effort, really. But we looked at David Morrison hard 3 years ago. He had an alibi. No physical evidence connected him to anything. What you've got here is concerning behavior, sure, but it's not enough for a warrant. What about the cabin? Ryan pressed. Did you search there? We didn't know about any cabin. He lived in an apartment at the time. Hayes made a note. I'll look into the property records, see if there's anything. But even if he owned a cabin, we can't search it without probable cause. Ryan left the station frustrated but not defeated. If the police needed more evidence, he'd find more evidence. That decision led him to make a choice he knew was dangerous. He accepted David's invitation to see his home office. The day he drove to David's house, Ryan told 3 people where